This podcast is brought to you by Meteorate.
Welcome to podcast number 6 of the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Show, featuring the erudite and highly knowledgeable Dr. Ross Walker and yours truly. This podcast, the main subject is the 5 stages of health. But
hang on. Yours truly who?
Homer Papantonio.
Yeah,
Thanks,
come
Ross.
on.
Sorry, I thought I was a household name already.
You are. You're a household.
Okay.
You're a legend in your own lunchbox.
Yeah. But first, let's start with a wellness joke. After all, we are the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Show. How about this one? Apparently, a great way to lose weight is to eat while you're naked and standing in front of a mirror. Restaurants will throw you out before you can eat too much.
Oh, gee. Yeah, well, you always know who the best man is at a naked wedding. Anyhow, but I wanted...
But this one is the true story. I had a fairly close obese friend of mine called Wally who took up running to lose weight. He was doing okay for a few weeks, but after about a month or so, I get a frantic call from him saying he'd just collapsed at the local football oval and to call an ambulance.
Right.
Shouldn't laugh at this. Anyway, I called an ambulance and made way to the football oval and noticed the ambulance had already arrived with him in the back. As the ambulance paramedics were treating Wally, I asked Wally, "Are you sure all this running is actually good for you, Wally?" To which the ambulance guy replied, "Sure is. We couldn't even lift him in the ambulance when he did it in his first event." We couldn't even lift him in the ambulance when he had his first heart attack.
Yeah.
So,
very good. Now,
okay.
I also wanted to let everyone know, and this is true, that by replacing your morning coffee with green tea, you can lose up to 87% of what little joy you have left in your life.
I thought you were going to say body fat there.
No. What little you have left in your life.
It is. I mean, people love their morning coffee, don't they?
As they should.
And it's great. Just one cup. I mean, most, I was going to say wogs. Can I say wogs like me?
Well, you can say wogs.
Yeah, wogs.
You are a wog, so you can say...
We are addicted to coffee. We love it. Yeah.
Look, the most commonly used drug on the planet is coffee. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
The evidence is overwhelming that having a couple of cups of coffee per day, I'm a coffee snob, so it's got to be high quality coffee, all this instant nonsense, but having a couple of cups of coffee per day reduces your risk for gallstones, kidney stones, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease,
dementia.
Sorry. You know, 3 advantages of having Alzheimer's disease. Number 1, you get to meet a new friend every day. Number 2, you get to hide all your own eggs at Easter time. Number 3, you get to meet a new friend every day. It also reduces your risk for many common cancers, type 2 diabetes, depression and stroke and heart failure. So a couple of cups of coffee a day, I didn't mean to talk about that, but it's very good for you.
So can you be dementiaist or Alzheimerist or Parkinsonist?
Onion.
I mean, like similar, like we can be racist. Can you be Parkinsonist?
I suppose
yeah. Or is that cruel to do that? It's always a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. But look, just before we move on to the topics, I just want to ask you a question. What do you get when you throw a piano down a mine shaft? A flat minor.
Flat minor. Beautiful. That was a quick Reader's Digest joke there, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Okay, so our medical news for this week is prunes and bone health.
Yeah, well, most people know what prunes are good for you. They give you a good, healthy bowel.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a good clear out, depending on how sensitive you are to the prunes. But this study of 235 postmenopausal women was a 12-month randomized trial. So obviously you can't have a double-blinded trial of prunes. You either know you're eating them or not. They gave them either no prunes, 50 grams a day, which is about 4 to 6 prunes, or up to 100 grams a day, 10 to 12 prunes. You're spending half the day in the toilet at 10 to 12 prunes a day. And they found that really the sweet spot, so to speak, was about 4 prunes a day. So that's where having 4 prunes a day gave you much better bone strength, bone density, and so therefore less risk for osteoporosis. So when you speak to somebody about strong bones, they say, oh, calcium gives you strong bones. So you've got to have dairy products to do it. And I say to people, don't use oral calcium. So osteoporosis is the title for another podcast. So we'll go more into that in another podcast. But certainly don't use oral calcium pills for osteoporosis. But this is just saying another good thing is not just dairy products for bone health, but using prunes.
But more is not better with prunes and bone health.
No, and I look, what's happening is the prunes are working on the gut microbiome to keep the gut microbiome healthier, so you have much healthier gut bacteria, which then feed better compounds into the bloodstream and therefore into the bones to make your bones stronger. But again, like anything, olive oil, I think, is one of the best components of the Mediterranean diet, but 2 tablespoons a day is the dose, not drinking a half a bottle a day. That's going to cause you all sorts of problems. So more of anything is not better.
Yeah, okay. Future of medicine, 3D printing of drugs.
Yeah, this is really interesting because we spoke in the first podcast about the fact that I believe the future of medicine is nanotechnology to take somebody who's on 3 or 4 pills a day and 5 or 6 supplements, put it all in one nano pill they swallow once a day with controlled release, so it's being released into the bloodstream when you've dictated it's important for that to happen. But how do we do that? Well, this new study out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, published in a journal called Molecular Pharmacokinetics, has found that they can 3D print medications. Now, when you think of 3D printing of things like guns and other things, you think, how on earth can they print medications? Well, obviously, you put the ingredients into the printer and you then feed the information that you want into that printer. So imagine walking into the pharmacist. So rather than just taking the drug off the shelf that's been sent to them from a pharmaceutical company, you go and say, okay, look, my child needs this medication, but they just won't take pills. They're too young to swallow a pill. They're talking about chocolate-flavoured pills for children. So they just eat the chocolate that has the stuff in it. They're talking about taking people on 3 or 4 pharmaceuticals, 3D printing that to have a personalised Homer day, Homer medication for Homer to take, as opposed to the Ross treatment, which might work for Ross. And so, and another really interesting thing that's happening in the field of pharmacokinetics and pharmacogenomics is that we're getting to the point where we'll be able to map people's genome to find out which drugs work for them and which drugs don't work for them. Because I line up 100 people, give 100 of them the same medication no matter what it is, 90 think I'm a genius, and 10 want to throw it at me. And you can never tell who's going to be in that 10%. But in the future, we'll be able to predict who's going to be in that 10%. So there you go.
So do you think there's almost like we have a one-stop shop? Like, last week when I texted you and I had that muscle spasm happening in my back and I couldn't breathe. I needed crutches just to get around.
Yep.
And I thought, well, the easiest thing for me would be just to hop into an ambulance and go to hospital and get everything assessed. So all my, do you think we'll get to the point one day where just go into hospital and every ailment you have or may have, you get assessed there and there?
Yeah, I mean, remember that wonderful, probably this groundbreaking television series, Star Trek?
Yes.
Jones, the doctor, would have that little thing, he'd just run over someone and immediately be able to make a diagnosis. We're getting to the point where we can do that. We're getting handheld ultrasound machines where people can have just a little device they put on someone's chest, and with their mobile phone, it will give a picture of their heart. And I think over the next couple of decades, we will have handheld machines that you can put anywhere and will give you a diagnosis straight away. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
But do you think that should be free? Do you think the government should be providing that sort of service free of charge?
That's a topic for another discussion.
Yeah, I know.
We talk about that. So I'm not a fan of free medicine. I'm a fan of look after the little guy who can't afford it, someone who's in the lower 20% of earners, and after that, there should be a graded series of payments to maintain good health. Because one of the problems is, Homer, that if you make something free, people don't value it.
Yes.
Whereas if someone has to pay for something, they give it more value. And I see people wasting their money on ridiculous things, gambling, and junk food and a whole lot of things that are bad for them, and not spending their money on stuff that's good for them. So, but I don't think we should be taxing things to the nth degree.
Yeah.
But equally, I don't think we should be making things free for everybody. That's another discussion.
And especially like tax on sugars and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Body of evidence,
Yeah.
diet and brain health.
Yeah, this was an interesting study done on 40 people who were already obese with evidence of insulin resistance. And I will talk, and our thought of the day is on insulin resistance, so I'll give that in the thought of the day at the end. So these people were put onto two different diets. One were given just a good standard healthy diet, which we all consider healthy: fruits and vegetables, little bits of meat, eggs, dairy, chicken, fish, nuts and oil, and olive oil. But the other group were given intermittent fasting. So to have a couple of days a week,
Yep.
non-consecutive, where you don't eat much. So the wonderful Michael Mosley, who tragically died on the Greek island of Simi recently, I was actually going to interview him on my radio show a few weeks after his he was timed to come on a few weeks after his tragic death, and I'd interviewed him last year on his on the sleep show that he did on SBS. But Michael introduced intermittent fasting to the world, and basically had a pretty rigid program on those two non-consecutive days. Showed to work very well in terms of weight loss, control of diabetes, etc. But there've been no long-term studies of this. This study was only an 8-week study, but it showed over that 8 weeks that just putting overweight people onto a healthy diet or intermittent fasting improved all of their metabolic parameters. So what does that mean? Metabolic parameters means better cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL, better sugar levels, hemoglobin A1C, better inflammatory markers, better liver function. And both diets did the same thing. But when they looked at intermittent fasting versus a healthy diet, there was a 20% improvement in brain health seen on an MRI, and also in neurocognitive testing of executive function and memory. So it said that intermittent fasting just sort of rebooted things a bit better than just being on a good diet. And I think one of the problems is when you put someone onto a new diet, their body adjusts pretty quickly. So if someone goes onto a starvation diet, the body goes into retention mode and holds on to nutrients. So I think it's a good idea to trick your metabolism so it never really gets used to what you're doing. So to have those couple of days every week where you just don't eat as much as you did on the other days. And it doesn't mean you go crazy on the other days. I'm just saying have a couple of days where you're just not taking in as many calories, and it shows it's good for brain health as well.
That's really intriguing. I have performed at an event called the Diggers and Dealers Mining Forum in Kalgoorlie. It's the largest conference in Australia. It's 450 tables of 10 under the world's largest marquee. But prior to doing this performance, I find I do have a ritual where I have a very strong cup of coffee, normally go to the Kalgoorlie pool. I swim in there for an hour, and it gets me it affects my brain in a way where I feel almost all-powerful, omnipotent. And it's a combination of maybe the caffeine, the exercise, and the endorphins that makes me feel great on stage. And I've delivered. And that's what it's a very interesting area, the effect of exercise on brain health, on mood, on things like that. You know, it's an area maybe we should explore in the not too distant future.
That's another podcast, but that's fine.
I
don't disagree.
Yep. And caffeine too. Maybe melatonin. Insulin resistance.
Yeah, this is the thought of the day. Did you know that insulin resistance is the commonest genetic abnormality in the world that affects 30% of Caucasians, 50% of Asians, and 100% of people with darker or olive skin?
Yeah.
What does it do to your body? It sets you up for diabetes, pre-diabetes, diabetes, high blood pressure, high triglyceride, low HDL on your blood lipids, and it's easy to put on fat around the belly. And then all of those four things lead to cardiovascular disease, keeps me in a job, obesity-related cancers, fatty liver, gout, and in women, polycystic ovaries. So the thought of the day is go off and have a check for insulin resistance. You don't need any flash test for it. Basically, the way to screen for it is an overnight fast, looking at your blood sugar level and hemoglobin A1C, which is 3-month sugar control, looking at your blood pressure, and for all of us, sitting quietly by ourselves for 5 minutes, the blood pressure should be around 120/80. Look at your blood lipids, cholesterol, triglyceride, HDL, extrapolated LDL, and get a tape measure around your belly and make sure your waist circumference for a male is less than 95, for a female less than 80 centimetres.
Okay.
And let me make one final point before we move on to the topic of the day. There's a test called a glucose tolerance test that many doctors in this country still order. It is 2 hours of your life you'll never get back. It's a complete waste of time. All you need to know whether you're predisposed to diabetes, what is your overnight fasting sugar and hemoglobin A1C. If they're above certain levels, you're in that category. So, for example, HbA1c, 3-month sugar control should be somewhere between below 5.5, preferably below 5. Most people don't have it below 5. 5.5 to 6.5, pre-diabetes. Above 6.5, diabetes. Blood sugar level, normal is below 5, 5 to 6 is a grey zone, 6 to 7.5, pre-diabetes, above 7.5, diabetes. The glucose tolerance test tells you nothing more above that. You'll sit in a pathology department, they take your blood 3 times, they give you this horrible tasting sugar drink, and it shoots your sugar through the roof. It tells you nothing more over and above what I've just said. So there you go.
As a footnote to that, Ross, aren't we all addicted to sugar, salt, and fat? Aren't we all? We're all addicted to sugar, salt, and fat. So the way to neutralize the effect, as you just alluded to, that it has on the body is aerobic exercises neutralizes the effect pretty much of sugar, salt, and fat on us. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think exercise is an important component, but also what does is not becoming addicted to the stuff in the first place, or if you are, changing the addiction. So, for example, they gave rats the equivalent amount of sugar that most human beings would have every day and then stopped it abruptly. And those rats exhibited all the symptoms of heroin withdrawal.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you should wean this stuff. People still put sugar or sweeteners in their coffee or tea. No one needs this stuff. Don't put it in. Don't use them at all.
Is honey okay?
Yeah, honey's all right. There's nothing wrong with honey. But why do things have to be that sweet?
Because we're addicted to them.
Well, yeah, but addiction justify nothing.
No, but the sweet tooth. Some people have got salty tooths, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
And you know what it is, and the food producers know this, that it's a combination of fat, salt, and sugar.
Yep.
That really gets you high, have that effect on us.
Gets you addicted, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But I think we just all need to work on this stuff.
Okay.
Let's move on to the topic of
the subject this week, Ross, is, as you know, because you've written a book on it, the 5 stages of health.
Yeah.
You wrote a top-selling book with this title, first published back in 2011, where you debunk the myths of modern health and replace these myths with facts. So today we're going to get the truth and nothing but the truth about what are the real modern killers. What can you do to slow the aging progress? What vitamins and supplements can make a difference, and what you need to be doing to be healthy in every decade of your life. Thanks, Ross.
Think of it logically. You've got 5 digits on your hand. You have 5 senses. There are 5 seasons if you count Frankie Valley. So everything's in 5s. And so I base all of my medical suggestions around the 5 keys. So the 5 stages of health starts from the first stage strangely up to the 5th stage. So let's go into the first stage first. And the first stage is what I call the body stage. And really, to summarize that, medicine works. So when I started medicine in the 1970s, if you had a heart attack, your death rate in hospital was about 30%. So 1 in 3 people with a heart attack died in hospital.
Amazing.
Now, in the 2020s, we're talking about a death rate around or less than 1%. So as far as the treatment of heart disease or heart attacks go in modern medicine, we've improved 30 times compared with what we were back then. The treatments we have are so much better. So if you're having severe chest pain, don't go to a naturopath or a faith healer. Go to a hospital and get a stent in your arteries. And no one should argue about that. That's the way to treat acute disease. If your gallbladder's full of rocks, you can meditate on it all day. It's not going to melt the rocks. You've got to have the gallbladder removed. If you've got an early cancer that needs to be resected wherever the cancer is, or get treatment with chemotherapy, radiotherapy, immunotherapy. Medicine definitely works. But the problem is it doesn't address the root causes of disease or take it any further. So let's go to the next level. The next level is what I call the environmental stage. And you see, we talk a lot about nutrition, but I defy you to open your fridge and find me something that's not in plastic. And when you and I were kids, we were told that the solution to the world's problems was to not chop down the trees, but to make everything in plastic. Plastic would be our salvation. Gee, that worked, didn't it? And so now we're moving away from plastics because plastics are destroying the environment. So, for example, in the New England Journal of Medicine, a few weeks ago, a study came out, I think it was about 257 people who had carotid endarterectomies. So they basically reamed out their carotids that were full of a whole lot of atherosclerotic muck, which is the buildup of fat and calcium and inflammatory tissue. And they analysed those carotid plaques when they removed them and found that people who had microplastics in the carotid plaques, so you have the plastics that you ingest from food or breathing it in or whatever, that gets into your bloodstream and spills into your plaques, for goodness sake.
Amazing.
So over a 3-year period, the people who had the most plaques compared with the people who had the least plaques had 3 times higher rates of recurrence of disease and death by just having those plaques in their arteries, in the carotids. Clearly they were in other arteries and other places. So this exposure to plastics and all the other synthetic chemicals, walk outside in any major city and take a deep breath. You're taking thousands of synthetic chemicals into the body. Here's another thing, Homer, this is going to shock you. 1 in 6 deaths around the world are directly linked to air pollution, indoor pollution and outdoor pollution. So indoor pollution is people, this often happens in Asia where they cook with indoor wood burners, or they have heaters on, wood fire heaters inside, and the smoke's spilling in. People are breathing in the smoke. But also outdoor pollution, of course, from cars and industry destroying the environment. Well, so when there's still people out there who don't believe in climate change, and I don't want to get into that argument either way, but whether there is or isn't climate change, it's obvious that human beings are destroying the planet with all this air pollution, where we're causing 1 in 6 deaths as a consequence of the pollution.
Interesting you say, so there's an old adage with cyclists, you've got to pick your roads and pick your times that you go out. Don't go out there in peak hour traffic, because I don't know whether I can phrase this correctly, but the hemoglobin in your blood has twice the affinity for carbon monoxide than what it has for oxygen. Yep. So it will go for carbon monoxide 50% more time than what it would go for the oxygen molecule.
But can I say to you, I think it's madness. People cycling along major roads during peak hour, it's madness. It stops people using that road to get to work, and I think that's really selfish to do it. But it's also stupid. And the reason why it's stupid is that these people are exercising, taking much more pollution into their lungs, so they're not getting the exercise benefit, they're getting the pollution detriment much more than if they were walking along the street.
But we need walkways, we need bikeways that are separate to roads.
Well away from the roads, of course we do. And in my view and in your view, cycling is one of the best exercises you can do, but not during peak hour. So it's not just all of the synthetic chemicals we're exposed to, which are markedly increasing our risk for chemical-induced cancers, for cardiovascular diseases I've already mentioned, but also behavioural abnormalities in kids. Autism, ADHD is much more linked to exposure to all of these chemicals. And don't be fooled by this nonsense where it says on the side of a plastic bottle, BPA free, because it just has a thing in it called BPS. So it's bisphenol S, not bisphenol A. Does exactly the same thing. It's like this nonsense about New York. They don't cook in trans fats. You know why? They use a different chemical process called interesterification that still creates thickened, hardened fats that damage your body.
Yep.
It's just that they're not trans fats. Oh, big deal. Thank you very much, fellas. So that's the chemical part of it, the environmental chemical part of it. But then there's also the radiation part of it. So you and I are sitting in front of computers. People are on damn phones all day. The background radiation we're now getting from televisions, from machines, from phones, from everything else is about 5 chest x-rays. Now that flight from here to Perth, Sydney to Perth or Gold Coast to Perth is about 4 or 5 chest x-rays. So we're getting this exposure to radiation all the time. Flight attendants have a much higher rate, and I know you were a flight attendant at one stage of your life. The female flight attendants, much higher rates of breast cancer. The pilots, much higher rates of melanoma. They're sitting there with the cosmic rays coming straight in their face. So there's so much background radiation in our environment that we don't even think about having an effect on our bodies. And it's also, I mean, you're not going to believe this, Homer, but some people have a television in their bedroom.
Mm.
And the bedroom is used for 2 things. One for a thing called sleeping, another one for that wonderful activity some of us get to before sleeping. That's it. It shouldn't be for anything else. But so that's the environmental stage.
So with radiation, you've heard of chelation therapy? Chelation therapy, where you can actually reduce the level of, your radiation harm through certain. Do you think we'll ever get to that stage?
No, look, there are some oral chelating therapies. There's some intravenous chelating therapies.
Yep.
And whether they work or not, I'm not sure. I've never seen any randomized controlled trial of these therapies to show they actually work. I have seen some subjective benefits that people have, but personally, as a doctor of 45 years, I've never seen anyone after chelation therapy who actually demonstrated to me any improvement. And I think you can get the improvements by the 5 keys and a few other things that we'll talk about over the time of this podcast.
But can you reverse radiation damage?
The answer to that is probably yes, but I don't think you can do it with chelation therapy. I think there are other things that do have some effect here. And to give you an example, there's things called forever chemicals. I didn't mention this before, but there's an old-style drug called cholestyramine we used to use to lower cholesterol. This horrible tasting paste that gets in and does lower cholesterol a little bit. It's not used anymore. But that was shown in a recent study to reduce forever chemicals by about 65%. And there are some combination supplements that have been shown to minimize radiation risk as well.
Okay.
So that's the environmental stage.
Yep.
Now let's move on to stage 3, which is the genetic stage. Now, I want to make the very important point that all disease is genetic, but your genes load the gun, then your environment pulls the trigger. So if you have the genes for heart disease and you then eat poorly, don't exercise, are stressed out of your brain, you'll be pushed towards heart disease. But if you do exactly that same thing to your body, but you have the genes for cancer, you'll be pushed towards cancer or Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, anything. Any disease at all has a strong genetic component. So, for example, your dad had a heart attack when he was 42. You've got a good chance of having a heart attack around the same time as well, especially if you live your life the same way your father did. But I've got families where 5 siblings, 3 have vicious disease, 2 have none. And you say, but hang on, Ross, same genetic makeup. No. We're all different. And when we talk about methylation in the next podcast, I'll explain more about genetics then. But if you've got that family history of any condition, it's important to have a regular check. I'll give you a personal example. My beautiful dad died at the age of 72 of bowel cancer. So I'm coming up for my 5th colonoscopy because of that. But the thing about colonoscopies, they're not just diagnostic, they're also therapeutic. So if the surgeon or the gastroenterologist finds a polyp, they remove the polyp at that time because the polyps are precancerous and they're all based on genes. Now, there are some severe genetic syndromes, thing called familial polyposis coli, when people are going to have hundreds of polyps in their colon. There's another called Lynch syndrome, which markedly increases your risk for bowel cancer as one example. But there's also just the more standard 85% risk for bowel cancer, the common one. And I interviewed a woman, Professor Michelle Wykes from the QIMR Berghofer Institute in Brisbane, superb place, which does some amazing research. And she's invented an immunotherapy that actually blocks the effects of the common causes of bowel cancer. So
wow.
And this is being trialled now. It'll be trialled in humans very soon, but this could be an absolute game changer in the treatment of bowel cancer. So what I'm saying is, if you've got that genetic history, go off and have some checks early on in your life. So I say everyone at age 50, every male at 50, every female at 60 should have a coronary calcium score. But if your father had bypass at 40, if you're a male, I'd probably have a coronary calcium score at 35. If you're a female, probably around 40, to see whether you've already got muck in your arteries.
But Ross, do you take into account that you were probably healthier than your dad?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
As I said, your genes loads the gun, your environment pulls the trigger. In those 4 colonoscopies, I've never had a polyp.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure if Dad had had the colonoscopies, we would have picked up polyps in Dad's case, and he would have had them removed. He may still be with us. He'd be well into his 90s now, but still, if you got the genes there, get it screened early for the disease, and the earlier you treat any condition, the better that condition's going to be. Let's move to number 4.
Number 4
is your your emotional stage. Your emotional stage. Now, let me make a great example here that I often give. You can't stand your partner, your kids are on drugs, you hate your job, you have a heart attack in the middle of it. If you go back to that situation without any change, nothing's going to change. Albert Einstein once said, there's nothing that's a more certain sign of insanity than to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result.
Or change is only change when there's change.
Yep. I'll never change you on that one. But you see, with that situation, you've only got a few choices. One is to put up with it and just do the same thing again. You'll probably have another heart attack down the track, not far off. Number 2, change your attitude to the situation if you can. Or number 3, you've got to walk away. So if you can't do one of those things, you're in trouble. So walk away or change your attitude or change something about the situation. It's going to help. So, for example, so many people are stuck in a relationship that's just toxic for them, but they don't want to be lonely, or they don't want the financial disadvantage of that. But often it's better than the situation they're in. So you've got to look at the emotional components of your life. What can you do about that? And that is the topic, what I call external and internal happiness. That is the definite topic. I'll just write it down here to remind me. A topic for another podcast is to focus on what we can do in our lives to achieve happiness, because I've got some great tips and I lecture on that. Another shameless plug. Some great lecturers. You've got 2 here.
It's amazing how you talk about people in toxic relationships, and you and I wonder why people stay in those relationships. But I'm of the opinion that there's 2 things that motivate people to change, and one is interest or love, and the other one is fear.
Yeah.
It's fear. Yeah. And fear can be a very strong motivator in a positive way quite often, even though a lot of psychs say you shouldn't fear, but you should. Sometimes fear is there for a purpose, I don't disagree.
But so I think people need to address the emotional components of their life.
Yeah.
I've been doing this job for 45 years and I've never seen one person in that time who had a heart attack, stroke, stent, bypass, who wasn't under some form of stress at the time. And we'll talk about the 5 stressors on another occasion for a podcast, which is a really interesting topic to get onto that.
Yeah. It's just also emotional connectedness that you speak on there too, isn't it?
Yeah. That's again. We'll get into that. But
I hope we throw dogs in there too. How great dogs are.
Well, yep. Some
Are
people,
you?
no, I'm not a pet person. So some people, I've got so many humans around me that I certainly don't need animals. But I think people who do love their dogs or love their cats. I mean, cats don't have masters; they have staff. But people who do love their animals, it's incredibly good for their health. But that's another topic.
That's good. Good.
Emotional stage number 4. Number 5 is what I called in the book the mind stage, but I actually wanted to call it the psycho-spiritual stage. Now, anyone listening to this, I'm not talking religion here. I have no right to do. I respect anyone's right to believe what they want to believe. But I still believe there's only 2 possibilities in life. Either you're born, good luck, bad luck, you die, which could be the case, or there is a purpose to life. And that purpose could be through what some people call God. That purpose could be through some other spiritual means, and I'm not going to get into that discussion. So I live my life as if there is a purpose. So therefore you see everything that happens to you as a teaching experience where you can either become a better person or stay in the patterns that are not working for you. And I talk in this psycho-spiritual stage, the 5th stage of health, is I think that's where all illnesses start. And the Hindus talk about these things called chakras, which are the 7 energy centers in the body. But they're corresponding with the 7 energy centers of what Deepak Chopra calls the 7 spiritual laws. And when you violate one of those spiritual laws, you get a block in that region. Now, again, I'll tell you a funny story, and this is not a joke. In 2007, I was giving a talk for a financial company in Singapore, and the topic, the talk was your biography becomes your biology. And I was giving an example at each level, each chakra level or spiritual level, how a block in that level caused disease. Now, my son, my eldest son, was with me at the time, because if my wife couldn't come with me when I give a talk, I always take one of my kids, and I've got 5 of them. 5, everything said 5, as I said. So I got 5 of them. So he came with me, and he's this hard-nosed developer, ex-lawyer. So he came and listened to the talk, and we walked out, and I said, "How did you enjoy the talk, Paul?" And he said, "It was the greatest load of beep I've ever heard in my life." I won't say what word he used. And he could be right. He said, "You just basically made up examples to suit your argument. There's no science at all behind what you said, and there is definitely no science behind what I said. But here's the problem, Homer. Science is only as good as its testing equipment. So there's no charcrometer, there's no spiritometer that can measure whether this stuff is real or not. But I actually believe it, and I've seen many cases through my life, especially in my specialty, which is the 4th chakra, the heart chakra, and the spiritual law there is love is the universal power. It's your ability to give and receive unconditional love. How many people get that? But I see people who get really severe problems in the heart area because of their inability to give or receive unconditional love. And I could tell you so many stories around that, and I probably would tell you one, because I think people listening will be interested in this. People might say, "Oh, this is rubbish." And I respect people's right to think it is rubbish, but I genuinely believe it. So anyhow, I'm giving a meditation session for AXA in New Zealand about 25 years ago, and I had about 80 people lined up at the ballroom, on the ballroom floor, and I'm taking them into a deep meditation because I've been meditating every day for 30 years, and so I can actually teach it, which I don't do privately, but I certainly do for corporations. So these people are in this really deep meditative phase. This young woman came up to me afterwards. She said, "Doc, I had the weirdest experience then. I felt someone was pulling a cord out of the center of my chest." And I just said, "I've just unblocked your 4th chakra." And I said to her, "Tell me about your medical problems." She said, "I had breast cancer a year ago." I said, "I know you did." I said, "And what I've done is I've unblocked the chakra. You need to keep meditating on that area every day." And I found out 10 years later, she was still meditating every day and totally free of cancer. Now, that's an example that is not a clinical trial.
Yeah.
But anyhow, about 10 years later, I'm giving a lecture up in Palm Cove for a different financial group.
Yep.
And I was giving this example. And I could see this woman in this red dress squirming at the back of the hall. And I knew as soon as I finished the talk, she'd be in my face and want to talk to me. So I finished the talk, bang, she's there. And she said, "Doctor, I need to talk to you." I said, I know, but we should do this privately, not in front of these people, because I knew she had something pretty deep to tell me. And she was telling me how she had both of her breasts, we had a coffee, both of her breasts removed for breast cancer and still had tightness in her chest. And she had a serious problem in that region. And she then went on to tell me, now wait for this, how when she was 5 years old, she wanted to cut her father into little pieces.
Right.
So imagine what happened to that poor lady. And
Yeah.
I said to her, you really need heavy work on this. You need to learn to forgive, because one of the most healing things you can do for the fourth chakra is to forgive and move on.
Yeah.
The worst thing anyone can do is to play the victim card all of their life. And look, what happened to her was outrageous. And it'd be very hard to forgive under those circumstances. But whilst ever she does, she's being punished by it by blocking that area. So to me, all disease has a basis in the psycho-spiritual aspects. And a lot of people might think, oh, hang on, this is getting a bit too heavy for a podcast, especially a seriously funny one. But I'm just making the point that these things happen and need to be dealt with. Rather, if we address the root cause of illnesses, rather than just say, oh, you've had a heart attack, this is the treatment we're going to give you, and take these pills for the rest of your life, you're not really addressing why that person's had a heart attack. Because this is the point, Homer. You can line up a whole lot of people who have exactly the same risk factors for any disease. So for heart disease, they might have a high cholesterol, high blood pressure, cigarette smoker, diabetic, or a family history. They might have any of those things, but some people have the heart attack, some people don't. What's the reason? I think it's because of that.
This is a really intriguing area, because both my wife and I are fairly strong Christians. We believe in a God. We believe that the Bible is a genuine historical document and everything else. And it's interesting how all other religions take a lot of their key messages. Like most people, other religions would agree that Jesus was a great bloke. He did all the right things. He forgave. He loved everything else. And he said, before you start criticizing anyone else, look at the whatever in your own eye and address
log in your eye,
log in your own eye. But it all comes back down to those areas that also are biblical, but other spiritual beliefs espouse too, and that is forgiveness, gratitude, optimism, perspective, all that. But what really concerns me is that people that don't accept that there's a spiritual, psycho-spiritual dimension to life. That's what really gets me. Really intelligent people that don't even address that.
But again, you must respect, and I do respect everyone's right to believe whatever they want to believe.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is I'm working on a book at the moment called Medicine versus Healing.
Right.
And medicine works for all the things I said, and I'm a great believer in it. But people aren't healing. And I think if you want to take your life to the next level, you must be healed. And the way to be healed is to look at each of those 5 areas of what you should be doing in each area: the psycho-spiritual area, the emotional area, what you need to do about your genetics, what environmental factors are affecting you, but also what medical treatment do you need. I saw people today as patients, and in fact, this was the first patients I saw today. Oh, but doctor, I don't want to be on those statins. But you've had a heart attack. You need to have that part of your life treated. So the statins in their case were important. So I think the whole system is important, not just saying, no, I'm just going to be spiritual. I think you've got to have the whole thing to have proper treatment for any medical condition. So there's the 5 stages of health. We'll talk many more. We'll get into more aspects of this. We'll talk more about internal, external happiness on another podcast.
Great. Thanks. That was great, Ross. So we've got some email questions. One's from Marcus from the Gold Coast, who asks about joint pain. Do daily fish or krill oil capsules ease joint pain in older people? I'm 67 years old, walk and cycle regularly, and just need to know what the best natural substance to ease joint pain is, as I've tried both fish and krill oil.
Yeah. Look, I think whether it's fish or krill, it doesn't really matter. I think there's a reasonable benefit for some people. And here's the problem with any of these natural therapies or even pharmaceutical therapies, for example, that not all size fits all everybody. There's some things might work beautifully for some people. I've got people who swear by fish oil or krill oil as helping their joints. Other people say, I took it, didn't do a damn thing. So I think there are levels that people can try. So, for example, good old-fashioned workhorse glucosamine, if you're going to take that, glucosamine, chondroitin, MSM in one combination, there are some good products on the market that have that. So you can take that, some form of omega-3, so not just krill or fish oil. There's a thing called New Zealand greenlet mussels that works well as in terms of the omega-3s.
Yep.
I think something that's really good for joint problems is a thing that's made by a company called drred.com.au. Because we're not allowed to actually specifically mention products, I'll just give the website, drred.com.au, and people who've got joint problems can go to that. I take all of this stuff to keep my joints healthy because I already had the right knee replaced from too much sport. And then there's some drinks that have very good anti-inflammatories that have basically pycnogenol in it. So it's things that are very, again, I can't mention the actual product, but this drink, 60 mils a day, can help with joint problems as well. And they're just some natural things that do help people that have a bit of arthritis. But look, I battled my right knee for 12, 13 years after I gave up soccer and squash, and eventually had to have my knee replaced. And it was the best thing I ever did for my knee.
Was that a full replacement?
Full knee replacement 4 years ago. It's worked.
Partial wasn't an option?
My knee was completely stuffed from playing sport from the age of 5 up to 52.
And was it keeping you up at night?
Yes, I'd get pain at night. I couldn't walk up and down stairs. I could still I could still cycle on my bike, but I couldn't walk up and down stairs, and I was in a lot of pain.
Okay.
Getting in and out of cars was just dreadful.
Amazing. So we've got Peter from Wollongong asks, are there any foods or natural therapies that might help with erectile dysfunction that is linked to an enlarged prostate?
Yeah, well, firstly, the point is there that the more you empty the prostate, the better it is for you. So the less you have engaged in sexual activity, the worse your erectile function becomes. So it's just use it or lose it, unfortunately, as far as that department goes.
Like weight training.
It's like weight training. It's the same thing. Again, you expect your good friend, and this is why men have pet names for their penis like Willie or George, because they don't like a perfect stranger making over 90% of their decisions. But what I'm saying there is that using it or losing it's important, because you can't expect this organ that sits outside your body, useless for the vast majority of the day, to be a high-performance athlete for 5, 10, 15 minutes every now and then. So use it as much as possible. When you're in your 20s, you have a mental erection every 7 seconds with blood flow going down there every 7 seconds. It just doesn't happen over the age of 50. So in terms of natural foods, well, it's what you shouldn't be eating, which is the processed packaged muck masquerading as food. So avoiding anything in a box or a container. It's good whole foods that are important, and losing fat off the belly, because the more belly fat you have, the more problems you have with erectile dysfunction. And then there are also some natural supplements. You need to speak to your naturopath about the natural supplements. Have things like tribulus in them, and there's also natural things you can do that'll help your prostate as well. Epilobium, saw palmetto, concentrated tomato paste, and lycopene. They can help some of those things as well. But then after that, vitamin V, which we spoke about last week, Viagra, of course, and that certainly helps the blood flow. And I think Viagra is it's synthetic, but it is a good thing to take for erectile dysfunction. And then finally, and this should be another podcast, the whole thing about erectile dysfunction, finally talk about men's hormones in the form of testosterone. But I think that is a longer topic for another day.
Yep. One more question. We've got Penny from Adelaide, and I love this area. Dr. Ross, what are your views on earthing and grounding? That is walking barefoot and the remarkable anti-inflammatory effect it apparently has on the body.
Yeah, there's been a fair bit of stuff on this, and I think it's a very good thing. We're getting back to how we were designed. No one was designed to wear shoes. But the problem, and this is the problem, it'd be great to be able to do that if basically there was no dangers walking around. But now with broken glass and people leaving their needles where they shouldn't be leaving their needles, and all the other stuff that's on the environment, you can actually cause a lot of trauma and ulceration and damage to your legs by the unnatural world. So if we lived in a natural world, I'd say fine. And if you're down the beach, of course, walk on the sand as much as you can. But you just have to be careful these days because of how humanity has destroyed the environment. That'd be the way I'd summarise that one.
Great. A little bit of a plug for Ross and myself would be perfect for your next conference or special event. Both of us are seasoned keynote speakers, particularly on well-being and performance in a very, very funny way. You're reasonably funny, Ross, aren't you, when you speak?
Reasonably funny, I'd say. Yeah, hilarious.
Definitely funny. And you do great impersonation.
No, I'd try my best.
You do a great Bob Hawke impersonation, apparently.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You're not... Would you like to share one? Or?
Not right now. If people want me to do it, they should write in and I'm tempted.
Okay, so that's about another week here for us. We'll sign off. It's goodbye from me. And Ross, do you want to finish with a dad joke of some sort?
Oh, yeah. There's two goldfish in a tank, and one says to the other, "Do you know how to drive this thing?"
Thanks, Ross. Au revoir.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.